Excellency, the President of the General Assembly, Honorable Ministers of Youth and other ministerial representatives, Excellencies, Secretary General Envoy on Youth, and distinguished youth representatives, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Sri Lanka and to the World Conference on Youth 2014, the first such conference to be held in Asia. It is indeed an honor. It is indeed an honor for Sri Lanka and the participants of the conference that the President of the United Nations General Assembly, as well as the United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy on Youth, are both here. Their presence underlines the importance of listening to the addressing youth issues with the direct involvement of young people. Excellencies, dear friends, Sri Lanka proposed to host this verse at the UN high-level meeting on youth at the UN General Assembly in July 2011. For reasons such as the increasing challenges faced by the youth, our own youth comprise about 26% of the population of 20 million people. At the end of the menace of terrorism, hopes among our youth for a secure, better and more progressive Sri Lanka had been renewed. And at a global level, the world has seen the largest generation of youth ever. You would agree that the increasingly large youth population who live in the global south make it impossible to discuss any follow-up to Rio Plus 20 and the post-2015 development agenda without considering their needs and challenges. The youth of today face an enhanced burden. They need to find a living for themselves, as well as increasingly care for an aging population. To ignore this growing trend would entail unmanageable problems for policymakers, national leaders and the global community alike. There will be around 3 billion young people in the world by 2050. It is imperative that a global strategy is developed to mainstream youth forces and ensure their participation in the existing and future development programs at the national, regional and global levels. I am confident that this World Conference on Youth will provide an inspirational platform for such deliberations. Excellencies and distinguished youth, the primary responsibility to ensure youth participation in development lies with the state. We as leaders and policymakers need to consider a number of challenges to make this effort meaningful and successful. From a traditional policymaker's perspective, all too often, the question asked, when you raise the issue of youth involvement in any societal processes, Do they have the expertise, capacity, knowledge, experience, leadership and the resources? Youth are seen as dependents or beneficiaries and not as active partners who can also contribute to good outcomes. Leaving aside these dominant perceptions, we have to recognize that today's youth have evolved and need opportunities to participate and contribute to a social progress. We need to readjust our traditional and conventional policy-making structures and institutions to accommodate youth participation. Our thinking has to change. We need to make that leap in policy and thinking when it comes to youth. Dear friends, what are the added values of effective youth participation? Engaging youth and consulting with them results in better policy formulation and implementation, including evaluation that helps fill policy gaps. It is only by engaging them that we will understand their problems, expectations, and aspirations. They need to be nurtured and their needs taken seriously to ensure the complete empowerment of youth, who are the future of every nation. As we know, the minds of youth are extremely sensitive to influence and can be easily misguided. This is the attraction for terrorist groups to recruit youth combatants to their cadres, often ending as cannon fodder or tomatoes, side and scarred generation. Sri Lanka faced this phenomenon when challenged by terrorist group, described by the FBI as the most ruthless in the world. In Sri Lanka, former youth combatants were treated as victims of terrorism and not perpetrators, and were all rehabilitated and reintegrated to society for a better future. We strongly believe that it is the society at large that can rehabilitate and reintegrate these misguided youth rather than any state apparatus. Dear friends, Sri Lanka accords special attention to the needs and aspiration of our significant youth population. Having experienced two violent youth insurgencies in 1971 and 1989, we are mindful of the cause that create violent discontent. More importantly, Sri Lanka has recognized that economic and social development was most successful when young people became active stakeholders in policy formation and implementation. We continue to integrate youth into our national policy making and implementation mechanisms through our network of more than 10,000 village-level youth-led organizations and the Sri Lanka Youth Parliament. Youth parliamentarians also consult and engage with policymakers and national parliamentarians, civil society to contribute policy inputs. This has also provided an important opportunity in post-conflict Sri Lanka to foster ideals of peace, tolerance, and harmony among the country's younger generation. Dear friends, through constructive engagement with a wider group of stakeholders. Undoubtedly, this conference will have a concrete and results-oriented outcome that would contribute to youth development and empowerment. I am confident that the President of the General Assembly will continue to address the needs of youth during his leadership. The Secretary General's envoy on youth was all as a messenger facilitating UN programs for youth and channeling youth views into the UN and its agencies will also feed the Colombo Declaration to the UN and its agencies. Youth need to be given a sense of purpose to harness their drive and vigor towards meaningful activity. Their innovation and creativity is vital to exploring new knowledge and preparing the world for the future. Enterprising youth have actively contributed in the fields of green energy, ICT, and media. Youth are well endeavored to reap the fruits and also bear the burdens of the successes and mistakes of the present. This has led to recognize both at the national and international levels that young people are not simply the recipients of services, but are active stakeholders in shaping the future of their communities. We as leaders must, therefore, be committed to providing avenues for the young people to play their rightful roles in crafting the future. I remember how myself as a youth activist fought for the cause I believe in, how myself together with my colleagues advocated and lobbied for youth priorities back then. But today, sitting on the other side of maturity, I see that energy in you. I saw that in the way you dance on stage here. I can see that enthusiasm in your eyes. I can still share your mood and feelings. I wish to encourage all youth to create an inclusive platform to act as catalyst, to strengthen partnership between governments, youth, civil society, and academia that address and advance the cause of young people. Be creative and always try to find innovative approaches to break barriers. Use your energy and potential to keep the seeking out a better world. Innovation and creativity are your own tools for a better world. Having said that, I wish to appeal to all of you, the young people who represent the world, to regard your country as sacred. It cannot be second to any of your interests. Nor can it be sacrificed for any given whatsoever. And again, there may be outside pressure to compromise your love for your country. But all such pressures must be resisted at any cost. Only then can we build a better world for all of us. I would like to invite you, all of you, to join me on Twitter for a discussion this Thursday at 11:30. I wish the deliberations at the World Conference on Youth all success and the distinguished participants a pleasant and memorable stay in Sri Lanka. May you be blessed by the noble triple gem, Thiruvan Saranai.
President of Sri Lanka, Minister of Youth and Skills Development, Youth Affairs and Skills Development, other ministers of government, members of parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and more importantly, you, the youth. This is truly about you. As you can see, I have forego the usual speech because I think this ought to be a conversation between me and you. And let me do that by acknowledging the wonderful statement we just heard from the youth representative of Sri Lanka to the UN. She said it best, and there are two things in her statement that stands out for me. One, she made an assertion which has caused me to rethink everything I know about youth. And I'm paraphrasing her. She said, we are the leaders of today. And I must say, until I heard it from her, I never thought of it that way. I was always thinking about youth and the future. So let me thank you for that. And I think it is true, for the simple reason that without you and without older people like me, and I'm the only old person here, so let me confess, everyone else here is young, including the president. Let me just say that without you, without your energy, without your inspiration, without your foresight, without your skills with technology, I would not be standing here. Truly, this is about you. It is your planet. You and your kids will inherit it. So whatever you do, you need, if you haven't done so before, you do need to get involved. This is we are talking about the future. And as I said until today, I was thinking of it as the future that you would inherit. It is a future that belongs to you. You have to do your best to ensure it, to make sure you are here. So your voices need to be heard. And here's where I bring in the Secretary General's Special Envoy. He talked about some initiatives that he is overseeing, although wrongfully he gave me credit. All the credit belongs to him. Thank you, Mr. Allenda, for the kind words you said about me, although I don't deserve them. You need to get involved. Why? We, people like me, have simply messed it up. And so you need to ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. We started a long time ago. Back in 1992, we had a conference in Rio. It's called the Earth Summit. And there, leaders of that generation took a decision to launch us, the globe, the planet, the international community, on the path to sustainable development. That was in 1992. Back then, the vision was to look at development along three distinct pillars: the social, the economic, and the environment. 20 years later, we had another conference at the same place in 2012 in Brazil. It's called Rio Plus 20. And then we took another decision to build upon what we said we would do in 1992, which is, and I'm going to let you in on a dirty secret, we didn't really do it, to undertake a true path to sustainable development. But we had some tools, we had learned some lessons, because a number of things that happened in the intervening period. For example, in 2000, and the young lady referred to this, we had adopted some Millennium Development Goals, and there were 8 of them. Central to that was an undertaking given to eradicate poverty. We decided to make that central to whatever we do. Those goals had a 15-year lifespan. They are supposed to come to an end on December 31st, 2015. And I know people have been here and you've been hearing things being thrown around. So let me take some time to explain exactly what we're doing and why you need to get involved. These goals, 8, and they had targets as well, as I said, will come to an end in 2015. Now, I'm sure you've heard the term post-2015 development agenda. Now, if we set out these goals and if we gave them 15 years, why are we talking about a post-2015 development agenda? Again, another secret. We haven't achieved all the goals. So, what do? We simply cannot wait until December 31st to start throwing our hands up in the air. We have to plan ahead. As President of the General Assembly, one of my first announcements I made when I was elected in June of 2013 was that I would ask the international community, more specifically the member states of the UN, to start thinking about, and I call it setting the stage, preparing for this event. And how are we going to go about doing that? We're going to look at some parameters. We're going to look at some initiatives. We're going to schedule some events so that we can start building in an orderly fashion the broad outlines of this post-2015 development agenda. Now, why do we need it? As I said before, there were these goals. Some have been realized. For example, we have managed to reduce the number of people living in poverty. However, no matter what country you go to, developing, emerging, whatever, there are still people living in extreme poverty. Given the resources that we currently have, that should not be so. So one of the things that we need to do going forward is to build on the successes of that particular goal and ramp it up. So instead of simply eradicating poverty, what we need to do is to eradicate extreme poverty. That should be the goal going forward. And we have learned from the goal setting exercise, if you have goals, all the goals need not have the same end point. That is, we need not sit down again and say, okay, we will devise 50 goals and then we would let them all run to 2030 or 2020 or 2025. No, we need to be more strategic in how we devise our goals, make sure they're meaningful, make sure we know how to implement them, and more importantly, have ways in which we can check what progress we're making. So that's one of the things that we need to do differently. But if you look at the MDGs, key sectors of society have been, I wouldn't say omitted, but clearly weren't included in the way they ought to. Women, the youth, or young, and civil society. So we need to do something this time around to make sure those sectors are involved. Why? Women comprise 50% of the world's population, and they gave birth to the other half. So all you men out there, remember this. You owe your physical presence to a woman. Be kind. Which brings me to the second sector, the youth. This is about you. Without you, it cannot happen. You cannot afford to sit on the sidelines. You were excluded during the development of the MDGs. and you see what has happened. Do not let it happen this time around. It is far too important. The stakes are much higher. You need to get involved. We want to hear from you, because this is about you. At the end of the day, this is about you. You're no longer the future. You heard it here from the youth representative. You are today. You're not a co-leader. You are today. You have to make this about you. I urge you to get involved. You have the means and, more importantly, the technology that simply was not available to me when I was growing up. I don't know how many of you, I'm an engineer by training. Now you ask, what is an engineer doing up there? Don't ask. So, when I was growing up, there's no calculator, there's no cell phone. I did my calculations using a slide rule. How many have seen a slide rule? Don't put up your hands, please, Minister, don't. It will betray your age. That's what happened when I was growing up. You have tools and techniques that are available to you. You can make your voices heard. You have to do it. You don't owe it to the future like I did. You owe it to yourselves, because you are the future. This is a planet that you will inherit. As we work towards this mystical, this magical post-2015 development agenda, it's got to include you. Otherwise, it's going to be meaningless. We would look back 10, 15, maybe 20 years from now and said, why did we exclude them? But more importantly, you would have to ask the question, why did you allow yourself to be excluded a second time around? Don't let it happen. Another point the young lady touched on, she talked about her own children. I'm a father of 2 sons. I know what it's like to plan boys. It keeps you up at night. And I'm not referring to the things that they do. But what's important, it also gives you perspective if you are a parent. And no matter where you are, no matter your economical circumstances or lack thereof, if you have kids, it gives you a different perspective on life, past, present, and future. When I think of the future, and I tell my kids this, I have lived my life. Like anyone else in this world, I do have regrets. I wish I'd done some things differently. But in my case, the die has been cast. And I tell them, this is about you. Ultimately, you have to take part in decision making. I can tell you, okay, you have to do your homework, because ultimately it would help you in school. But you have to want to be able to do it. You have to be able to see what it would eventually mean for you going forward. I stand here, and let me end here as well. This means something. If it didn't, I hope by the end of this conference it will. To you, the young, get involved. There's a lot at stake. Your voices need to be heard. Get involved. Thank you very much.